the NHL trade deadline at some point in 2022. I honestly don't remember the exact date off the top of my head. Did anyone know when the exact trade
March
deadline
21st.
is?
March
There we
21st.
go. March 21st. These days, you know what I'm saying? There's going to be guys gone from this Montreal Canadiens team. I don't know if you've seen the TSN trade bait board, but Ben Chiarot looks to be atop the list. Is he the only piece that they move? Is Jake Allen on that list? Who do you think the Canadiens are going to move out by the March 21st trade deadline?
I think, Julian, just about anybody, any veteran with a long-term contract is on that list. Jake Allen, I wonder if one of the reasons they're playing him so much right now, apart from the fact they don't have faith in Sam Montembeault, is that they want to show other teams that Jake Allen can still be a number one goalie. If a number one goalie gets hurt moving forward and another team needs a number one goalie going into the end of the season or the playoffs, and I think Jake Allen is showing that he can be. He's been the best player on the Canadiens this season, without a doubt, behind a terrible defense. I think when they start a rebuild, I think it has to start with trying to move Carey Price's contract, but I don't think they'll be able to do that before the trade deadline. I think that's something that would need to be done during the offseason, and the Canadiens would have to eat an awful lot of that contract if they're going to try and move Carey Price, and they're going to have to eat an awful lot of any contracts of the guys they move. I mean, Petry's contract, Gallagher's contract, they're long-term. There's a lot of money. The bright side of that is in a rebuild, salary cap isn't really an issue. So, the team would be able to afford to eat a lot of those salaries. And that's what they're going to have to do moving forward. But I think the rebuild starts with trying to move Carey Price, but I don't think they'll be able to do that before the trade deadline. But if they do end up moving Jake Allen, it's the end of March, and like a month left in the season. So that would give the opportunity to bring up Caden Primo, let him play the final month of the season as the number one goalie and see what you have with him. And that would help the decisions moving forward as far as what the Canadiens do with their goaltending. But as I said, right now, I think Jeff Gorton has to be listening. Like, I think everybody's on the table. I don't think there's anybody that you can say is untradeable.
And I think Jake Allen just might ask to be traded. He'd be shell-shocked if he continues to face what he's facing, for most of the year. But, realistically, you got to look at guys like Chiarot. You got Weidman, no big deal. Kulak. I mean, these guys are unrestricted free agents. They've got to get an idea, whether or not they're part of the future and be prepared to pay whatever they think their worth is, which the way they're playing right now, they're asking too much. But I think, generally speaking, the whole group that they have, under contract right now is not the kind of personnel that you need that are going to have any type of success. So I think Jeff Gorton is going to have to seriously consider shaking up, a number of their players. And of course, some things will never change. In order to get something back, you got to give something. So there's maybe some big names, and have to change locations, and however they can make it work with money's being paid, how they can offset it through everybody splitting some of the salaries. They've got to change their personnel because it's not happening with this group. So each and every guy there is got to be topic conversation when it comes to trade bait.
Yeah, I feel like Jake Allen is definitely out there right now because he has had a very solid season considering the circumstances, and his cap hit is just so digestible. He is signed for another year, and the Canadiens are going to have to move guys with term this year if they want to make some moves. But I think Jake Allen is a guy who can fit in for a lot of teams and fit in under the salary cap in a salary cap situation where almost every team is capped out. It's a very tough time to move big contracts. I think that there are guys that if they want to move on from, it will be up to them. Like if Jeff Petry wants out, then maybe they would look at moving him. But other than that, I think the contract is long and expensive. Brendan Gallagher, again, if he wants to move, then they would go for it. But other than that, probably not. And even Carey Price, I think that situation comes down to what Carey Price wants. Because if Price wants to stay in Montreal, I think they end up keeping him because you look at what's happened this year. They can't undervalue leadership anymore. And Carey Price is such a strong voice in that room. If they go through a rebuild and Price wants to be around for it, he can be a steadying influence to give some clarity through a rebuild. And that's something that the team can't undervalue. And if you're going to trade Carey Price, you need to get value back. It can't just be about eating salary and shedding salary cap room, especially if you're rebuilding. Who cares if your goaltender costs a lot of money in a rebuild? You're not going to be capped out anyway.
So what value are you going to get for Carey Price? I'm curious about, because remember, he's not cheap. He's like $10.5 million. If you're Jeff Gordon and the Canadiens management, whatever draft picks you can get or whatever players you can get, you might have to almost just kind of take it on top of the fact that you're going to have to retain salary. That's not like, I understand what he means to this organization, and we've sung his praises all the time. But good luck in the salary cap world that we're in right now. That's only going to go up by about $1 million next year to have anybody say, you know what, we really want to take a chance on a guy whose knee is bothering him. Also had something with his hip in the offseason too. Not to mention the Canadiens tried to find a way if they could have this contract off the books with the way they handled him in the expansion draft as well. Yeah, I think at that point you might as well just cut your losses and take what you could get. I'd be stunned if they got anything. Like if someone was like, yeah, we'll give you a first because we're desperate for goaltending. You take that first round pick and you run, as far as I'm concerned.
Maybe
Seattle,
but they're not going to get that, right? Like the only way they're going to get that kind of return is if they do a 3-team trade where another team is taking in some cap space, right?
Get Arizona involved.
The way I see it is like, if the optics of trading a franchise player like Carey Price, unless he's specifically asked to get out and you get like a 2nd round pick or a 3rd round pick, that's disastrous. And it's the kind of thing that I don't think Jeff Gordon can do as like one of his first moves as the top of the ladder in Canadiens management.
But just getting rid of that contract is huge. I mean,
but does it matter if they're rebuilding?
Yeah, but
that's my point.
Yeah,
Seattle could have had him for nothing, right? Seattle could have had Carey Price for nothing. They took a pass. Carey Price obviously was interested in going to Seattle, or he wouldn't have waived his no movement clause to be there. So you wonder if Seattle might have interest in Carey Price if the Canadiens are going to eat half his salary at least, because the salary cap isn't an issue right now in Seattle, and there's a big name you'd bring in and sell sweaters and everything else. I don't think Carey Price wants to be here for a rebuild. I mean, he's playing now. The only thing missing is a Stanley Cup. He wants to go somewhere, I think, where he can win a Stanley Cup, or maybe go back closer to his wife's home and his home in Seattle and play there. And again, just because Seattle didn't want him in the expansion draft because they didn't want that $10.5 million cap hit, and there's probably issues concerned about his knee, doesn't mean they wouldn't want him if the Habs are going to eat half of his contract. And I can't imagine Carey Price wanting to stay here for a rebuild. And the other thing, we're talking about Jake Allen. Not only the way Jake Allen has played, but the character he has shown this year would make me, if I'm an opposing team GM, really want this guy. He spoke the other night about, playing with pride and showing up to play and all the right things. I mean, we haven't been able to be in the locker room since Jake Allen came here, so we haven't really get to know him really well as a person. But just listening to him in all his press conferences, he's an impressive guy. He's as impressive off the ice as he has been on the ice. So if I'm a GM on another NHL team, he's a guy I would want not only for what he can do on the ice, but also the presence he would have in the locker room.
That's very true.
And let's not forget Brendan Gallagher in this mix, with a guy that has basically said, I'm not sure whether or not I want to be part of a rebuild. And, there's a name that as much as everybody loves him and, he's a great person on and off the ice and does what he can do. The reality is in the business, sometimes you have to move some big guys or big names to get something back. So it's going to be interesting. He's got a lot of piles on his desk, Jeff Gordon, to figure out which is going to make his team better moving forward for obviously for the long term.
Absolutely. We're going to be talking about this a lot ahead of March 21st. That's when the trade deadline is, and who knows which Canadiens players will be on the block by then. Leave us a comment about who you think will be gone from the Montreal Canadiens ahead of the trade deadline, and visit hockeyinsideout.com to watch full episodes and check out any other fun stuff on the site.